Hello and welcome back to another Strange New Worlds review. That was better than I thought. I thought the syllable and stress was all off. Like, how was I supposed to keep hype and build excitement for the video with a title like Strange New Worlds? It didn't work. But you know that went better than I thought. But anyway, bit of a weird one day today because this is all a massive lie. This is all smoke and mirrors. Because it's actually, what time is it? It's 3:36 p.m. on the Wednesday that this episode's gonna come out on. I don't even know if you're gonna see this, but this is preparation for the just in case. Because basically tomorrow, so Thursday, probably not the day you're seeing this, I have a flight. I'm flying back home for the weekend, which means I won't have my film equipment. I won't have time to do a review, and it's basically a bit of a faff. However, it's late enough that I definitely would have time to do a review before the flight, albeit maybe slightly quick. But with a roommate, they might sleep in that I might not be able to. It's all complicated, but basically this is intro prep. In case I can't record a review, I don't want to waste time doing the intro. But yes, the second episode, it's not often that we're before the thumbnails nowadays. Children of the Comet, which is probably going to be great. A great episodic romp. It's like the first time since... not Terra Prime, not In a Mirror Darkly. I'm sure Season 4 had a one-off of Enterprise, but God, I don't know what it would be. But anyway, the reasons I can tell that is because of the episode description, which is on Memory Alpha. It doesn't sound like any particular Star Trek episode, but I feel like there's a good 7 episodes that are kind of like this episode, which, you know, because there's 800 of something of them, means it's going to be just an episodic episode of Star Trek, because that's what all the Voyager and Enterprise ones were. But no, that's good. I mean, that might sound a bit negative. I really hope in my first review it came off. I was very positive about that episode. Certain elements of the episode, Spock, Vulcans, no. But, the episode as a whole was very enjoyable. And I'm really, oddly loving the specific problems, the TOS problems this show brought through. In tone, at least for the first episode, you know, there's plenty more to judge it by. I think it's helping capture that TOS, and it's really working, and it's entertaining in that same way TOS was. I'm very happy with it. But yeah, these Strange New Worlds reviews are going to be a bit weird. Last week, I had an interview, so it was a bit delayed. This week, I'm on a plane because of an interview. Next week, so episode 3, I have my major field exam, which is in the middle of the day, and so the review will be late, if I can even do it. It's the same problem of I need the dorm to myself to record for a bit. But that one you'll get by at least the weekend. Then episode 6, I have a final in the morning. It's rough. And then I'm moving across state, probably starting a new job. Strange New Worlds. God, this is going to be a series that's hard to get through, but we're going to try. So you may have an abridged review after this. You may not even see this. I might, after the next cut, be in a completely separate room 300 miles away from here, somewhat tired. I don't know. But we're going to see how this goes, and we're going to try and get through all 10 episodes. Or you're just going to get a short, and you're not seeing this. I don't know. The problem is I don't actually have my film equipment. I think I can use some over there, but I can't bring my film equipment beyond, a camera. And I'm going to have to bring this mark. Okay. We'll figure it out. But I hopefully will see you on the other side of this cut. So, it turns out, when my roommate says, it's fine, I got an 8 a.m. final tomorrow, I'll be out of your hair, you'll have time. What they meant was they had an 8 a.m. final, well, a test actually, but that they'd be back in the dorm at 11. And so, at 10:50, when I was just finishing up watching the episode, my roommate walked in, and I went, oh. Also, I just like to point out, it's not that I didn't realize I would need a zip tie for the microphone. I did, and I thought about bringing one of my many zip ties. But it's that I knew I had a new pair of shoes, and so I'd had this old shoelace, lying around that I could use and just chose not to bring a zip tie because they're one use. That was a mistake. However, at least I did. Oh, it's kind of behind me. I do have this guy set up. The Strange New Worlds. I'm gonna move that. Here we go. We got the ship from the show. I can't see it in my viewfinder, but I hope it's there. However, I did forget the 10-foot HDMI, so instead you get my parents' film light. Yes, this is somewhat a business that runs in the family. You should see the rest of this setup. I'm on an exercise ball, and my computer's on the box for the Vulcan Cruiser. But, yeah, because of, well, that, and also, well, I've got a lot to do on this trip. I was really kind of hoping to have this done and edit on the flights. This is going to be a bit of a shorter review, also because I watched the episode almost 12 hours ago. I'm not going to remember everything I want to talk about. Yes, that is my 11-foot green screen that I've kicked with my foot and has just moved the camera. Again, to set this tone. But I want to give you something, right? It won't be too long. We'll skip the scene by scene. I just want to give you something. Better than nothing. And also, there's not actually an outlet because I didn't bring all my extension cables. So my camera has limited battery life. So I got a bit of a cap on this anyway. But yes, Children of the Comet. I mean, yeah, it was an episodic episode of Star Trek. Like, bam, it really felt like the first one since Enterprise, which is weird because we've had Lower Decks and Prodigy, but I think Lower Decks and Prodigy are always kind of doing development, like there's character development going on, but I mean, this one had it too. It's strange, but it really does feel like a classic Star Trek, not in the Lower Decks way that, it feels like a classic Star Trek, but in the fact it feels like this was made next to Strange New World TOS. Are they on screen yet? No. God, I didn't even add this guy either. I brought him. I love seeing that thing get longer. I really want to steal this when I move out. Like, steal this and keep it. I love watching the Blu-rays get longer. There-ish. But anyway, yeah, I was... Oh, and by the way, we are firmly in the territory of not talking about Spock, which is just something I'm going to do for these reviews, unless it's a particularly Spock-heavy episode like the, Time Amok, Spock Amok. That's what it's called in Strange New World, Spock Amok. Yeah, I'm just not going to talk about Spock, because I've said my thoughts on Spock. We're not having another Picard here. But this episode almost very much impressed me. It was like one of the most impressive ever, almost. Because I've said before a lot that the best mystery is one where the audience, this is what the audience knows about the mystery, and the people in the show are either here or like here, maybe here, but usually it's amazing when it's here. You're at the same level. And I don't think I've ever had that before. I think season 3 of Enterprise was close, but I don't think there's ever been a moment where I've kind of realized the solution as the characters do. And I almost, I had a moment of a television viewing experience I'd always remember, where Spock was talking with Uhura. It was one of the scenes, and he left and she was humming. The walls started lighting up, which I didn't even notice. I just heard her hum after they had a talk about kind of languagey stuff. And then the moment Spock stopped and kind of perked up, I went, oh, it's music. And I saw that it was the moment, the millisecond that Spock also stopped and obviously had his realization. And I went, it's music. That's why it was the patterns. I mean, even the symbols are kind of, they do kind of look like alien notes. It's music. And so I was expecting then the Spock to basically turn around and say, it's music. Or kind of have that quick, it's when clever people realize the solution to a puzzle and they're like, oh, it's this, it's amazing. And then they spent 2 minutes figuring out that it was music. They were like, oh, the cave's reacting to your voice. That's weird. Oh, it changes with the pitch of your voice. What could this mean? And I was just, I'm not angry. I'm disappointed. I'm gonna say it was a good puzzle. Not original at all. I'm sure Star Trek has done it 3 times already. I mean, there was the Paradise Syndrome, came to mind immediately. the really dodgy TOS one about the Native American tribe. Yeah, I to the point where I thought this might even be some precursor thing, but it's still like, unless you're the kind of person where, like, with riddles, you'll kind of know when someone says a riddle, you go like, oh, is it time? Is it wind? Is it water? Like the common ones. It's not really the obvious one. I think they led into it really well. And as I said, you had the beautiful just setup of the dialogue they talked about that don't get you think it doesn't get you thinking about what the thing is. But then when Ahura starts humming, you go, oh, it's the moments. Oh, it's music. Everything's so clear. I just wish the characters had it. Like particularly Spock, who you think might have done this sort of thing enough to really get it and be clever enough, be logical enough to go, oh, it's music. It did kind of rub me the wrong way as well, where I was fine with that. Like, yeah, this is great. I'm like, yeah, it's a similar structure to, how we do music, because you're going to have these notes that are different pitches. You're going to have some tempo. Like every civilization, all music is going to have something like that. But then they had the talk about why would aliens have music like us, which really rubbed me the wrong way, because it's wrong. Like I don't do music theory. I've mentioned my piano keyboard. I think you've seen it before. I'm beginner. I can play the first half of the right hand section of Giant Woman, and like that's it. But from Steven Universe. But I know from school, and my partner is real big into Japanese culture, that Eastern music is different. Like the music that generally, to my knowledge, the whole world understands is kind of that notation. I know it's going to be a bit less, this is how music works in other parts of the world, non-Western parts of the world. But, the kind that's kind of become the standard is the classical European, mid-European, Eastern, Western European notation, and the notes and the chords, and all originated in the West. But there's no reason it actually has to be those notes, those separations, those chords, those anything. In Eastern music, and I can't remember, I'm pretty sure Japanese, I know for a fact Japan or China has this, probably both, but I don't remember which one. At least one of them had, and I mean, it still is, but they had a completely different set of notes that just didn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't match with English. With the Western European, because they are different notes. It is non-universal, and it's part of both why it can be so hard to preserve Eastern music, is because the sort of what I understand to be largely international Western European notation style just doesn't work. And so few people know what exists for an Eastern one, which, as I understand it, never really had much of a formal notation. I mean, most old things did, like ancient Greek songs, medieval songs. We don't really know what they sound like for the same reason. And anything basically before Europe's classical period, to my knowledge, in my experience, we just don't have that notation, or at least standardized. Like, we can't read that notation. And so, especially when you're talking aliens, like, yeah, I believe that, plenty of aliens would come up with a music system that happens to match, or at least really closely resemble ours. By ours, I mean that Western European. It's mine. It's my cultures. It's the one I know, and it's the one that, kind of like English, is used like in most places, is sort of the human language. I know loads of problematic, but it's kind of the standard one we use. I understand that the Western European notation is kind of like that. Again, I don't do music theory. If I'm completely wrong and talking out of my ass, just feel free to correct me in the comments. I accept that, it's not universal, because human music is very much based on the fact that we hear a specific range of frequencies. But in Star Trek, I'm willing to accept the precursor race. Everyone has roughly that audio range, at least includes what we have. Some are higher, lower, but I'm willing to accept that. It just really rubbed me the wrong way of I know they don't mean it, because I'm sure they believe that, we're often told music is universal, and in a way it's true. Like, it can transcend languages, and at least within humanity, generally convey the intended emotion across cultures, I know there's muddling. Actually, there's a lot of muddling even to what is music. I did take a world music class as an elective. Like, I know it's not universal, but the point of that, like, everyone could listen to it and enjoy it, or at least musical-esque things, because there's things like the Islamic prayer is not music to to Muslims. They wouldn't really call it music. It's different to like music as I understand it and how it was I've taught to me, like not quite the same, those prayer chants. And yet to most of the other world, like, yeah, it's holy music, but it is music. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, but just rubbed me the wrong way of like, this is what the West does and it's universal when it's really not, and kind of those older imperialistic ways. Great for TOS feel. I know they don't mean to, because as we're brought up with that music as universal. That's why I was going. Where like, yeah, there isn't a universal esque element to it. That, you know, to some degree everyone can enjoy it or at least listen to it, you know, and be like, yes, this is music, maybe not my taste. Like, I'm sure the writers believe that. They're just wrong. And it's kind of a ignorance in itself. It's the product of the problem, not causing the problem. But yeah, I mean, I'm overdoing this. It just rubbed me the wrong way a bit and kind of ruined what was otherwise a really good mystery, real solid episodic TOS mystery. I enjoyed it. And it made me go like, it's obvious when you know the solution, but you know, it's not obvious initially coming into the room, which I really liked. Another thing, I'm afraid this might be a bit of things that rubbed me the wrong way because it was so long ago. No, I'll pivot. I really like what they're doing still with Pike, and what he's going through, knowing his future. I hope they're not changing the canon, like with Una's kind of pushing him. It kind of feels like that. Maybe the future's not written in Star Trek very recently. I mean, even in Picard, has gone the opposite route where like, yeah, they've very much done that your future is what you make it. And I adore that Pike, what he's doing is knowing, like accepting his future because, and I love it's a brilliant idea. He knows the names of the cadets whose lives he's going to save. Like probably, you know, he said he felt the death, like he kind of saw his own future. I might expect he maybe gained knowledge. I guess he couldn't gain knowledge of what his future self would know, because then he'd remember the missions he's going on now. How he does it, I don't care. I just accept that he did, and he's also almost conflicted, where like he doesn't want to do it, but he'll look at the 5 people, which incidentally, amazing, let's randomly pick like people from around the world map. Totally wrong, because, you know, if you were doing a random sample, probably the vast majority of your population would be Asian, simply because that's where most of the people be. But it's that sci-fi equal numbers of people that I quite like as the representation. But anyway, I just love those scenes where he kind of sits down and he's like, bring up the names, like show me these kids, because they're kids now. If you kind of want to start analyzing it, like if he knows these kids' names, yes, it'd be very easy to avert this future. When he's doing the flight missions, he gets it, all right, cadets, Jim, Bob, all Western names, because I don't remember their real names, Lopez. Oh, hang on a minute. You know what, guys? We're going to have the day off on this one. I'm just going to write you a pass, and I'm going to schedule some maintenance checks on this shuttle. We'll do this again tomorrow. Like, yeah, he could avoid it if he really wanted to, which is also why I'm kind of worried that he won't. It's still the moment it's creating, and it's what it's doing for what I already had. Like, I didn't think he knew before, because, like, why would he know? How would he know? Before Discovery, I didn't think Pike knew. But it's that, all those feelings I talked about before, where the guy who played Pike in the Menagerie, just that knowing acceptance, that knowledge, just fleshing it out is a no, he did know. And this is what it's like to go through, even the things like, how do you see yourself in a decade? Just the knowledge that I won't be here in a decade. I adore what they're doing with Pike, and I keep it up. I mean, it is what the series is to me. I'm sure they probably won't do it for 8, you know, if they have their 7, 8 seasons, but at least the one series, like, to me, that is what Strange New Worlds is Pike dealing with the knowledge of his future, and I'm loving it. I will point over to the little, I always gotta get that in there, don't I? It did feel weird to me that Pike could kind of just pull up the records of like these random kids on Earth. I guess there's only one of them. It is kind of weird that every unique name was like, oh, do you mean the like which Mohammed Smith do you want from the list? But it was weird, especially as they're kids. You could just be like, show me Jeremiah Johnson, and it just pulled up photo and everything, like some ID of Jeremiah Johnson, and it's like, that feels weird. I know it's a utopia, but like, you shouldn't be able to just pull up info on these random kids without being on a list or something. Like, I accept a database would exist. I mean, loads of them exist. America's basically the only country that doesn't have some such database. We have them. It's just not quite as formalized. Like a lot of countries have national identity cards, something like that. We have social security shortstops that really aren't supposed to be there. And we might as well just have the card anyway. It's getting a bit political, but you might say maybe it's a Starfleet thing, right? He's military, he can look it up. And I'm like, okay, but like, you think he'd kind of have to give a reason. Like, that's still kind of dirty as well. It's an abuse of power in that point. I don't know, it's weird, but it's still, I can appreciate what they're doing with the message. And I mean, I can let it go. The Federation database is already crazy enough, isn't it? Is this the point to address my, like, just random or girl shirt? I kind of want to know what people think my or girl shirt says. It says this. But I've just seen it on the viewfinder. I'm like, what do you, like, if you're not non-binary, like, what do you think this shirt is gonna be? Let's go on. The communication with the aliens, great design. I'm loving these kind of, they're still a humanoid, they're the precursor offspring, but these, you know, alien designs, I really like the shepherds, that was the word. But there's a lot about that. This was a weird mix of the TNG professionalism that's been so great. I mean, TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise to a lesser extent, because they were a bit more the getting in, but they were still very professional. Of that, when they found out the problem was the comet was going to collide with the planet, it was the classic options, the people kind of back and forth. Wasn't as much back and forth as I wanted. It was kind of the once-off solutions. But I love there was a lot of scenes with these conferences, these meetings, which Discovery does, but it's still kind of emotional, more emotional and quippy. This was still a bit quippy, the Marvel stuff I wasn't quite as keen on, but it felt more Star Trek than anything before. I mean, Prodigy's not going to do it because it's the kids, like, learning the ropes. They might get there, but they can't do it now. Lower Decks has scenes like that, but they always gotta have their joke, like Mariner yawning or something. This was the one where it's all the perfect, and those are great, like, I get those, it's those shows doing a specific thing, but it was great to get Star Trek back in that sense. But then you had bits, like where he's having the conversation with the guy on the screen. I think he butchered that. It was almost in the ways that the Sound of Thunder, some of the problems I have with that episode, which I really need to do my big review on why that's a bad episode at some point. The worst episode. But I know you're there. I know you can hear me. You are. Look, you're the worst season of television ever made. But Sound of Thunder, you should feel bad about that one. But when they went through and he was like, we are the shepherds, I'm like, oh, you know, kind of religiously, it makes sense. They're kind of guiding the Comet. I thought it was a nice name. And Pike, well, they're on the view screen, is like, really? And you're like, that's how it's translating it. And I'm like, was it so weird to you? But he's a captain. It's not like it's his first day on the job. He's experienced some probably actually weird species. Whereas this guy's like, yeah, they're the shepherds. I liked that name. I thought it was good, but hey, that's a minor gripe. Editing Nathan here, actually having to hold my mic like I was a singer, so forgive the audio quality. I've realized actually that that comment about the shepherds wasn't actually a joke. It was actually how the writers told new viewers that there was a universal translator, and in that regards, it was really clever. I mean, the line they happened to use didn't quite gel with me, but it was so natural, I didn't even realize until after I had finished recording, so I wanted to give them props on that one. That was really well done, just wasn't a fan of the particular line they chose. But then it's like, I honestly felt that alien was a very respectful, reasonable, he was the most reasonable and respectful person in the conversation. Even if let's not get into the religious-y. Was he right? Is there the God or anything? Let's just analyze the two people with different viewpoints of, he's like, you're a reasonable man, Pike. Like, what if, we're actually right? Which is a valid point. Like, if they are right, well then, yeah, it's kind of the comet's, there's an argument to be made that if they're right, the comet will move if it wants, it will bring life if it wants, it will destroy if it wants. But, obviously we think they're wrong. The audience, there's probably no one in the audience who's like, oh, you know what? I'm convinced. I'm now a comet worshiper. Pike's response was, just letting a planet die is blasphemy or something. He basically went up in his face and said, your fundamental beliefs are just wrong and not even worth considering. That's not how you negotiate. It was awful. Whereas my response sitting there is immediate. It's like, you know what? You're being reasonable. You're treating me as an equal. You recognize a differing belief and you want to try and get through this. Like, yeah, getting your way, who doesn't? But you want to try and help me see that I'm wrong and negotiate, get through this peacefully. And so, what Picard would have done, Cisco, Janeway, what the response feels like is like, thank you, or something. But like, have you considered, like, let's say that, yes, you're right, the comet, I'm never going to remember its name, it's been hours, is God, I'll simplify this a bit. Like, if it is the comet's wish to crash into the planet, then our interference can't do anything to change that fact. If you're wrong, and this is just a comet, then we can divert it, and no harm has been done, because it was just a comet. However, if you're right, and we attempt to divert it, then it's not going to work, and ultimately no harm will be done. And further, if it's the comet's wish to move, how do you know we weren't brought by the comet to move it? It's kind of it's very standard religious arguments. Do I think it would have worked? No. I mean, it might have. You might be surprised. There might be another retort, but the point is you're working through it. You're at least trying, and hey, you're buying that time you want anyway. But the point isn't, do I think it would have worked? It's that they should have done it. And then even as a show, you could have him just no. Then you could basically continue on unaffected. You don't have Pike go, your fundamental beliefs are just wrong, and I'm not even going to make an effort to try and respect or understand them. It's made worse by the ending, where they almost kind of acknowledge that, yeah, they were kind of right. Like, this comet actually has some sort of preordainedness. We'll get into that, but like, it just really rubbed me the wrong way, and that's not the Star Trek response. And Sound of Thunder had a lot of that as well. I respect how they made sort of the villain respectful. I mean, he was like one of the best negotiators, the best diplomats, just heck, the best people we've seen in Star Trek for a while in that kind of sense. I mean, Chakotay, is that cheating? Like, that's kind of off the top of my head, I feel Chakotay is the last person we've seen with that kind of respect. And he's Chakotay. He's a classic character. And it's just that Marvel stuff. Like, it has its place, the Marvel quippiness that's kind of gone everywhere in media. You can't get away from it. But it's some places where I wish Strange New Worlds, you keep that TOS camp, you can kind of have that lighthearted, I love my job, but it's the knowledge of where it works and where it doesn't. Like, there's the places where they're in the firefight, and yes, other Star Treks have done this before, where like they have kind of too long conversations about how they should run away, and the lasers just don't hit them while they have their conversations. I wish they didn't do it. I recognize every series does that. Anyone long enough to have that sort of thing. But it's things where like they're in this fight, and I can't remember. Spock said something, I can't remember the response. Like, you do like to like shut down other people's suggestions. I don't remember. That wasn't the comment. I can kind of understand them making that in the battle, but then Pike, in this battle, while they're kind of on a time pressure looking for options, is like, she does have a point, Spock. I'm like, is this really the time for this? Like, does it matter if she has a point? You're not going to address it. You're going to let it slide. If you really want to deal with this as an issue, you think you could go afterwards? Like, that kind of feels like what TNG would have done. Is, they have the battle, and then afterwards is kind of the relief, the tension breaker after the battle is like, Data, Worf does have a point. And I want to address, I keep saying what TNG would have done. It's not like TNG is the standard everyone has to follow. I mean, I've said before, I love what Discovery's doing, in large part because it's its own thing that no other series has ever really done before. In that model of here's how you get to utopia, as I've described it a lot. But I keep referencing TNG because it's generally that classic, not quite TOS, because that's classic in a different way, but the Berman era of, TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, that feel that I think generally most people would classify as core Trek values, and generally is the sort of things that when people talk about the classics and keeping that classic feel, they're talking about those shows. I mean, it's there's a reason this was advertised as a modern Strange New Worlds and not a modern TOS and not a modern classic Star Trek. But the reason I say TNG is because I think it's broadly recognized that TNG did those values the best. I'm not saying that other shows don't have fantastic scenes. I'm not even saying TNG is the best. I mean, I kind of like the argument that Deep Space Nine is the better show, TNG is the better Trek. There's my hot take. But when I reference that's what TNG would have done, what I'm really saying is someone who really understands those values and what I think the Starfleet should interact and how I think broadly most people would describe a Starfleet should act, TNG would have done it. Because we all know TNG was incredibly popular and still is. There's a reason it is the only 80s, 90s Trek I got on Blu-ray down there. But no, I'm enjoying it. And hey, if we make the argument that season 1 is going to be the weakest Strange New World seasons, because in general, your early seasons aren't as good as your later ones. Some shows peak in the middle. But if we're going to say it's only going to get better from here, if they're keeping the same teams, then hey, like season 2, season 3. By season 3, we could get real good. I mean, Discovery made so much more improvement in 2 seasons. Imagine what Strange New Worlds could do in its season 3 or 4, where I feel Discovery's really found its place. Imagine a Strange New World that's nailed it. That could be the biggest thing since The Next Generation. Yeah, I realize I'm kind of breaking my time rules. I'm kind of doing some quick fires. I'm still not a big fan hanging out with the original casts. And I actually realized when Samuel Kirk died, Samuel Kirk could have been an amazing red shirt. Like, he would have been the first red shirt I've really felt for. Kind of like Carlos Cortez. It was a C name, a Latin C name, Spanish C name in Deep Space Nine. It was like an engineer you got to know in the Dominion War, and he died in an episode, and you kind of felt that a bit more because he was a red shirt you knew, despite being a yellow shirt. And when he died, imagine if he was a red shirt. Like, it's his character you've got to introduce, not Kirk, not, it was just some guy. Like, you even got the quips. It was beautifully set up. I'm starting to like the mustache. You're like, yeah, you're getting used to Samuel Kirk around. You feel like he's going to be a series regular. Like, he's going to be around a while. And then if they killed him like that, I think it would have done a lot. It would have done what Destroying Quajon did, where it set the stakes of these people are mortal. And it just, I would have felt it. I was like, oh. I mean, it wouldn't have been like, I wouldn't have been devastated. But I was like, oh, wow. I was really liking that guy. I like getting to know him. Like, man, that was upset. But even then, just faking the sort of death fake out, like, he will die if we don't get him back. Yeah, they could have killed this random guy, like this random nobody. And I would have felt tense. It would have had, meaning. It really would have felt, raised the episode up a level. But it's Samuel Kirk. And I've seen the original series. And I know Samuel Kirk dies in a little under a decade on Earth Colony 2 or something. It's like the most TOS name ever. And he dies with his wife and maybe some of his sons. One of his kids lives. so he's not going to die here. And it made me realize just how many of these characters are immortal. Samuel Kirk, yeah. Pike, I will grant you, Pike is immortal, but that's kind of the point of his arc, so I'm not going to count him because they're doing something very interesting. I don't want to say unique in fiction, but I feel like I've never seen it before, and it's a new take. I'm not going to count Pike. So Kirk's immortal, Uhura's immortal, Spock is immortal, Chapel's immortal, Dr. Mbango is immortal. The transporter guy I kind of recognize. I don't know if he's in he's kind of supposed to be the TOS transporter guy, but like 5 of these cast, who's not immortal? I guess you got the Anir, the security lady, pilot lady. Hey, welcome to being autistic. That might be it. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting someone. 5 of your 8 bigger characters, named characters, are immortal. Oh, Una. Yeah. But then you kind of get to the point where like, they're not going to kill any of these people because they're the new characters we haven't introduced. Like, there's always the level of they're not going to kill the main characters, but they could kill some people. And really good writers can make it feel like they are in danger. And even if you know they're not going to die, you can still get that across. But I think it would have done so much if they had far fewer recurring characters. Honestly, it would have just been Spock. Maybe Dr. Mbango, actually. He would have been interesting, but, like, that's who I would have done. Oh, and Pike, of course. I kind of like Samuel Kirk, but for this episode, like, I almost might have rewritten it where there wasn't a Samuel Kirk, but it was someone you really got invested in the place of Samuel Kirk, and he died. And that made you feel something. Well, it made you feel the tension in the episode, like, what if he doesn't make it? And you could have even done some stuff, tied it into Pike, maybe Uhura's insecurities or something. You could have tied it in, but it also would have made me feel for the rest of the show, these characters are mortal. They might die. And that's a powerful thing to do. And that was my last big one. So Quickfire. I forgot last episode when the Anir beamed down. I meant to do this as a joke in the scene by scene. I just laughed at it because I was like, hey guys, I'm here for the episode. Like, we ready to start? He just doesn't realize he's late. I found it weird when her was talking to the Anir. I was like, oh, can I help? And she had a line, she was cut off, but like, I was taught to always help or ask if people with physical disabilities need assistance. And I was like, you were? Like, I'm not saying that, dog eat dog, everyone for themselves, but it felt weird for me as an autistic person. I don't have any physical disabilities. Well, I'm unilaterally deaf. I need glasses, but I think you get the point. But it's like, I mean, yeah, if it looks like someone's struggling or like they might need help, sure. But I've often kind of asserted that generally the people with obvious physical disabilities can get kind of annoyed with people always asking for help with the littlest things. And this guy clearly was not struggling with cutting carrots. In fact, I was still on the fence if he was an Anir or not, because he very clearly did not look blind to me. Which, could have been Anir stuff, but like, he's never acted blind. I didn't even know if he was blind. That's the point. And it's like, would the utopian, like, 23rd century really raise a woman who sees an Anir she knows is a blind race, so like this race is used to being blind, and is preparing food while showing no signs of struggle whatsoever while preparing the food? You think she'd go like, well, clearly, like, they wouldn't put this guy in charge of preparing food if he wasn't capable. It just kind of struck me the wrong way. Is maybe, I don't know if it's an older generation writing something. It just, like, yeah, it's the wording. It is. Like, obviously, I don't have a problem assisting the disabled. Like, on my flight over, they needed to get little chairs for elderly people with walkers or something to like help them get up the stairs. Like, yeah, I'm not saying don't help the disabled, but it struck me as a weird, like, I was taught to always ask people with physical disabilities if they need assistance with like anything. I was like, really? Then I feel like you've missed the point. I found it funny when it kind of looked like that massive ship snuck up on the Enterprise, when I can't remember when it was, but like, oh, that ship. I'm like, you didn't see that? Like out your I know these are windows now. No, I quite like Kirk's character. I like a lot of the personalities of the newer people. I mean, I guess Kirk's not a newer person, but Kirk, of course, Pike. God, we all love Pike. They sold the series on Pike. Some people I'm still getting used to. I don't quite know. There's a weird blick that Pilot Girl almost does feel a bit, in the show in general, but her especially, does kind of feel like a 21st century character. It was just the casual clothes she was in, which I don't doubt the future would get, I suppose you call it naked, the kind of less clothes, the cropped, I don't know, fashion. I'm just going to sit here and rub my tits. It's some bits it kind of felt like a 21st century hangout just in the in Pike's room, and I like Enterprise did as well, but that made sense given its era. We're not too far off there. I guess you could argue they didn't do a lot of casual stuff. In fact, did they do any casual stuff in TNG? They must have for like family or stuff. Like you could argue that maybe that doesn't look like the 80s or 90s because I didn't grow up in the 80s and 90s. I don't know what that looks like. But I did sit there watching her outfit and was like, you know, I kind of would have loved them to at least try TOS style. If you've never seen TOS casual outfits, um, look them up, especially the female ones, because they are something else. Yeah, but solid episode. I got 41 minutes. This was supposed to be quick. I enjoyed it. I mean, I'm glad we got this review. I'll be back in Bellingham for the next one. You shouldn't see a dip in the reviews. It turns out this is really hard to photograph for a thumbnail. That's Monday's video. It's like a 6-hand job to get the floating to cell pictures because no, turns out I can't take them separately and just align them in Photoshop. It looks bad. But yeah, thanks for watching. I'm glad we could do this today. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. That video might get delayed till Tuesday. You can follow my Twitter if you really want to know. I'd probably post something like that in the community tab. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.